Every month, we go inside communications with Mike Raia, president and founder of Half Street Group. And we've got a lot to talk about on the home front here, Michael, with it's starting to feel a little bit more like election
Oh, you
season.
just hang on. I don't mean to interrupt. You just Michael'd me. Am
It
I in
is,
trouble?
we're in the season. You are now Michael. All right.
Love
Everybody
it.
heads
Okay,
up.
let's do
Make
it.
sure you cross out your business cards if you've got one floating around right now with Mike Raia's name on it and update it. Because it's getting serious, at least in the sense that the candidates for governor are now on television. And I think a lot of people, when they see Helena folks, they go, oh, yeah, I remember she ran in whatever it was, 2022. And I generally remember the figure. I generally remember the story. But she's positioning this election cycle as, hey, I kind of introduced myself to the state last time. Now I'm really introducing myself to the state last time. You worked with former Governor Raimondo. You've worked in and around politics and messaging for well over a decade. Your read right now on the communication strategies from the two major candidates for governor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. We're starting to see the race speed up a little bit right now, obviously. And the General Assembly session wrapped up about a week ago. You're starting to get a sense of who's going to run for some of those local seats. You're starting to see the congressional delegation in the state more because it's slowing down in Washington. So people are starting to pay attention. And I think that's the natural timeline of when you see candidates start to go on air. And I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit of the conversation. What I think you're generally seeing from the candidates for governor, and I think we're just going to start there right now, is candidates that are recognizing that the state's willing to and that they're ready to start thinking about what they're going to be doing on that first Wednesday in September, and they're starting to pay attention to some of the issues, and they're starting to think about the leadership around some of those issues. I mean, obviously, the Washington Bridge, school scores, those kind of things that are perennially and constantly in people's face because it's part of their everyday life or part of the natural dialogue that they have with friends and with neighbors and with colleagues. But now there is that opportunity to be able to, for candidates to insert themselves into some of that conversation that folks are having. So it's certainly ramping up. And I think that we can continue to expect to see more ads coming. I think that we can continue to expect to see a lot more public events that the candidates are going to. We're going to see a lot more direct engagement with voters doing the retail. And we're going to start to see a lot more media coverage out of it. I think this is one of the things from my past experience on you're going to start to see more political questions. You're going to start to see more he said, she said type opportunities that create a need to respond to news cycles that are not necessarily driven by the power of incumbency or the power of an insurgent challenger to a campaign.
What do you think of from a television ad messaging standpoint right now? It really is. We haven't seen the full on predictable line of assault, if you will. Helena folks making the argument that McKee is outright incompetent because of the Washington Bridge. At least we haven't seen it going that direction. But the predictable line of messaging is definitely happening from the McKee side, where they're trying to position Helena folks as an out-of-touch CEO of CVS, which is in and of itself not exactly, or not. In fact, it's not a correct title in terms of what
She
she
was a
actually was.
CEO.
But you're right. But so there's this notion that she is in some way directly responsible for the opioid crisis. And she's unreliable in that regard. So that's the message. Is that going to work? Is that going to resonate with people right now?
No, I mean, I find it that, like, when you said he's taking the predictable route, I actually think it's pretty unpredictable. I've never, short of maybe Donald Trump, seen an incumbent go negative exclusively against an insurgent challenger. And it is a bit of a head scratcher, to be totally candid. I think that it is one of those things that when you're in a position of incumbency, when you're in a position where you've got a 6-year track record and running, it seems and maybe their polling's telling them something that we're not seeing out in kind of the general punditry world. But that seemed to be an odd opening salvo, especially for an incumbent governor who many Rhode Islanders don't still know There's
Mhm.
still a good amount of um, unknown. But I mean, when you look at the public polls that are out there, and his unfavorables are much, 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 much higher than you would expect for any incumbent, even in a state like Rhode Island that traditionally doesn't like their governor. Um, but what I'm always seeing, excuse me, is the fact of he's been governor for 6 years and he still has a no opinion or an unknown in the mid teens. So there's a lot of people who just don't know who he is, and if I saw numbers like that, if I saw that kind of approach, I would be looking for the opportunity to be able to reintroduce him and be able to articulate accomplishments, be able to touch on some of the bread and butter things that he's focused on or that any governor would focus on, to be able to do that and then leave the attacks to either when her profile is starting to move in a positive direction or to other people to be able to lay them on. So to me, that seems odd, and in some ways, I believe that it's in some bolstered her profile. And she's on. When you actually think about it, there's 3 ads that are running on television right now, and her face is in all of them. It's reminding everybody that she
Yep.
is out there that's running. And I do think, like to your point, the line of attack that they choose, I think, is just a little bit too much of a leap for people to make it all the way there. I think that it is a vulnerability that she has, and I think that she's done a very good job of addressing what she did at CVS to scale back the prescriptions, what she did with drug takebacks. But I think it's and I think it's a little too large of a leap for a casual Rhode Islander to believe that she was singularly responsible in the way that they're casting her for an for a national or international opioid crisis, that really, and there's been literal thousands of pages of books written about the Sacklers' responsibility for it, about the FDA dropping their responsibility around any of it, and does the private sector and do others hold some accountability? Most likely, but I think it's a lot to ask people to logically go from she ran the retail operation at CBS to she was the rationale and the reason for a opioid crisis that killed 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, and to your point, when you think about Dan McKee, here's a guy over a 30-year political career has lost one election. One time he was the incumbent and lost his incumbency as mayor of Cumberland. There's a formula for Dan McKee. Now, we saw a little bit of it yesterday in a release where four mayors and one Providence councilor endorsed the governor, Grabian of Pawtucket, East Providence, De Silva, Beauchamp in Woonsocket, Lombardi in North Providence, and Juan Pichardo, Providence City Council. Okay, that feels a little bit more like old school Dan McKee. Municipal leaders on the ground. Hey, I know everybody from X, Y, and Z engagement that I've had during that career. That's how he's won elections before. That's how he beat Reaganburg largely in 2018 in that lieutenant governor's race. Yet we haven't seen any of that. It's like, why in the world wouldn't you lean into that which is your not only strength, but which has proven victorious in basically every election you've ever run in?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to it. I'm obviously not in a circle. I should say, kind of with full disclosure on this, I'm personally supporting the Folks campaign. I've donated to her campaign, um, and I do think like you're not wrong about Dan McKee's track record. And this is a guy who he's a survivor. He's a someone who is at the end of the day is always able to find his way with the most votes that were tallied. Um, I don't know what's different in this one in terms of the approach or why they're taking some of the other tactics that they're taking, but it does seem like I was saying at the beginning, like it's an odd tact for an incumbent who has the levers of government, who has the bully pulpit of being able to command media attention and media coverage when he wants it. I don't think they make good use of it. And I think that that's something that becomes a lane. And because doing that, because they get hit with hard questions from media that they're uncomfortable answering oftentimes. And I'm saying they because it's the governor and those around him. I believe, in that perspective. And I think in some ways it could feel easier to try to take this attack of if I'm going to be brought down or if I'm going to have someone come at me. And I think it's telling. I mean, there was that WPRO clip a couple of months ago where he was caught on tape saying that it was disgraceful that someone would run against him in a primary. And I do think that some of that tone comes from some of that place and some of that sense of here's where I am, here's who I am, and go there. But I do think that the guy has a strong track record if he chooses to lean into it, that he can at least introduce his campaign on more of a positive foot and provide voters with a rationale for staying with him. And that's ultimately, when you're an incumbent, that's the argument that you're making. You're not making an argument of don't vote for that person. You're ultimately making the argument of let me finish the job. And the only way that you're able to win that argument of let me finish the job is for people to understand what the challenges were when you first came in, what you've done to address those in tangible reality, and how you're going to continue doing that. And that's where I would see from an incumbent. In some ways, and frankly, it's what you're seeing in the way that Jack Reed runs for reelection. It's what you're seeing in the way that Greg Amore is running for reelection. It's the way that you're seeing, frankly, Brett Smiley run for reelection right now. And Brett has or Mayor Smiley has a very tough race ahead of him, one that they're taking seriously, but one that he is doing his part to define the terms in which it's going to be engaged on. And he's talking about what the things that are important to the city and what needs to be governed. And I think that that's a stark contrast to what we're seeing the incumbent in the governor's race do, where he's spending even out on the earned media side and when he's out there talking about other people or other opposition, which is taking him off message from where he should be as an incumbent.
Just quickly here on what Dan York calls the undercard in this race, Ken Block, the independent candidate, and Aaron Gukian, likely the Republican nominee. There's a couple of people running as Republicans this year. One of them's Elaine Polino, who's a social media influencer from Foster or Gloucester, something like that. Whatever. The idea is right now you've got Aaron Gukian posting these videos on Twitter that are part of on X, where he's got some kind of echo effect on his voice, and he's just sometimes in gym clothes, just random thoughts or direct attacks on Ken Block. Now, Ken Block had scheduled a press conference at the State House where he was going to roll out somebody from the Rhode Island Dental Association. That's the institution Mr. Gukian was most recently the executive director of. Then Block abruptly canceled that press conference. Does it even matter? Does any of this even deserve attention right now? It seemed like Block may have been a factor out of the gate, yet we haven't heard much or seen anything really since day one. Your take on, from the standpoint of candidates and from the standpoint of the general public right now, assessing what Dan York calls the undercard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Dan's synopsis or title of it is wrong. It is. It's hard to win in this state as a Republican statewide. And I don't think that any of the ones that have thrown their hat into it are the profile of who would. And maybe a Charlie Baker type can come along at one point in the state. Maybe things can reach a more of a simmer than a boil. And a moderate, business friendly Republican can step in like we've seen in the past here. But that day is not right now, not while Donald Trump is in the White House, at least. And the Ken Block thing, I mean, we talked about this last time that I was on. I think Ken is brilliant. Ken is the smartest person in every room he walks into, but Ken's biggest flaw is that he will tell you he's the smartest person in any room that he walks into. And I think that that's indicative of the fact that he said right out of the gate that he wasn't going to hire any staff because he could do it himself. And scheduling then canceling a State House press conference without giving a name of who it's going to be or what it's going to be focused on is kind of indicative of a campaign that's being run by the candidate.
As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Bartholomew Town is proud to partner with Waterfire. Visit waterfire.org. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. And by the way, join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Raia for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. Bartholomew Town, proud to partner with the University of Rhode Island Online. Are you ready to take the next step in your career at URI Online? They offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, their online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. You're going to learn from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. Bartholomew Town is proud to partner with Newport Film. Visit newportfilm.com. Follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew. Yeah, and let's, just for the sake of democracy and for the sake of getting conversations started, I just hope to see that tighten up and there actually to, more follow through and more activity generated. We talked about this earlier this week. Please. Go.
I do think, though, you asked the question of does it matter? I think in June it doesn't. I think that primary will play out. I think the reality is Guckian's going to win that race unless something. Guckian's going to win that race unless there's something completely out of the ordinary that any of us have not thought of yet. And it will be a three-way race in the general. Three-way races, anyone can play spoiler in it. My read on it, and I think that any casual observer's read on it, would be when you look at the ideology, you look at the priorities of the third-party spoiler that is potentially running, they're not going to be taking votes away from a Democrat in the general election. Right. They're going to be taking votes away from a Republican. They're going to give a never Trumper who has a really hard time pulling a lever for anyone with an R next to their name right now an opportunity to be able to cast a ballot for someone that's not a Democrat. And I just don't see it being a scenario where it's going to be like it has like it was in the Chafee race, where Chafee was able to pull from both the left and the right to be able to build a coalition in the middle to be able to win as an independent. I just don't think that the math works in this kind of race, and I think that the where Ken's ideology is on this is very much a mirror to what Aaron's is, and the only difference being that they have very different styles and very different philosophies of leadership. And that's what's going to be the distinction there. It's not going to be an ideological one.
Yeah. Earlier this week, just speaking with some candidates here on the show, just in general, I think over the last couple of weeks, there's been some discussion about, or even some elected officials speaking with some elected officials here earlier this week, just feels like a slower rollout to an election year than years past, that everything just is a little bit behind or something, or just the lethargy is there. I think part of it's the Trump factor. I think that just based on polling, And in one poll, a Pew poll showed that 6 in 10 Americans are tuning out news that has any connection to Trump. They're just checking out. That would include local politics, at least in some way, I would assume. But what's your take as somebody who's been around a number of cycles here? Is this a year that's like, for some reason, why do you think that is, that sentiment is out there, that it's a slower rollout?
I don't know. I kind of feel like we could probably just rerun this tape again in 4 years and say the same thing. I feel like every 4 years we say it's quiet. No one's campaigning yet. The race hasn't started yet. It's starting later. Like I remember that in 2018 when we were working on the Raimondo reelect. It doesn't really pick up in Rhode Island until after the General Assembly gets out. There's not active campaigning that's happening because everything is a negotiation around the budget and around the final legislative push. I think you're going to see it really ramp up once you start to see the local candidate filings, once you figure out who is running or who's not running for General Assembly seats, who the candidates are going to be for Providence City Council, because that's the point when the state parties start to get involved and start to pay attention to it. They start their endorsement process. It's also, frankly, like you're not going to, when you think of these things from the investment of resources perspective, it doesn't make a ton of sense in a state like Rhode Island where you can get statewide media coverage for not dirt cheap, but not super expensive to be on air for months at a time while people aren't paying attention. So when
Right.
you look at where people are and if you say you're going to have a 2 million or a 3 million or whatever the dollar is media budget, you're going to want to start engaging around that when people are most ready to engage. Because to your point, most people, not those that are listening to this podcast, don't engage on politics or in elections until they have to start thinking about what their voting plan is going to be.
Yeah.
So talking to 1.1 million people in a state 4 months, 5 months, 6 months before an election that they're not going to actually start engaging with until 2 months before is just throwing money out the door, which is why you see them engaging with their base and doing the fundraising that they do and meeting with and doing the retail with the very, very engaged community organizations and community leaders. And if you go and you look at both Dan McKee and Helena Folks' social media in February, March, April, May, that's what they were doing. They were at
Yep.
every Portuguese festival that they could come across. They went to every indoor farmers market that they could be at. They did the house party listening sessions to be able to get out there. And they're talking to the 10% of voters like us who would recognize Ian Donis at Whole Foods if they ran into him. But the vast majority of the state, I love you, Ian, but the vast majority of the state are not in that same orbit that folks like you and I are in.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make economic sense from a resource perspective to engage until now. And again, like I said, let's timestamp this and let's talk on June 16th, what would that be, 2030?
2030.
And I can guarantee you one of us is going to say, it seems like it's starting later again this go round.
Yeah, it's so true when you really, as you were saying that, I was reflecting back as well. And you know what it is? I think also it's just the nature of the elections. When you had caricatures like Alan Fung and Gina Raimondo, and they're
Or
obviously
Joe
human beings.
Trillo and
Joe
Patty
Trillo,
Morgan.
totally. Patty Morgan with the guy in the chicken suit outside of City Hall. Joe Trillo bombastically, going nuts on the Matt Allen show, playing keyboard live in the air. You had a lot of you had a lot of freaks in the race, man. And I think
Yeah,
that
that's
got a
like
lot of people's attention,
there's not like and this one like there's Dan McKee and Helena Folks are I wouldn't call them conventional candidates necessarily because I think that's a slap in the face to anyone who puts their name forward to run.
Mhm.
But they're not outlandish. I like your phrase, they're not cartoonish. And there's not
Yeah.
that kind of personality that makes you think about it more or that becomes kind of a thing that cuts across or jumps across the zeitgeist into almost pop culture. And honestly, like when you think about like we usually get that from a third party, we're not going to get that from Ken Block. Like
No.
unless someone wants to have a conversation about walking dogs on the beach in Barrington, we're not going to get anything that animated out of him.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. I remember, I think it must have been maybe 2014, something like that, where maybe it was 13. I came home. I was living in New York, and I came home for Thanksgiving, and we went to the Atlantic Beach Club in Newport. They had that like get the buffet. I was miserable as a vegetarian back then, but I remember like getting my plate and coming around the corner, and there he was in real life for the first time I ever seen the man in real life, Alan Fung, standing right there, and I was like, it's like seeing a celebrity. I didn't go up and say anything. I was like, there he is. That's Alan Fung, because it became something more than just a political figure. It became almost like a presidential race in a way, where those Gina and Alan became personas. And I'm not sure that anybody yet in these races has become that level of celebrity, like junior
Right.
varsity celebrity persona. And
No.
I think they could. I think they all could, but they just haven't found that footing yet.
Right. The other thing too, and I'm just thinking about this as we're talking, is this is the first, maybe the second statewide race that we've had for governor where there's no opinion section at the Providence Journal. So we don't have Scott McKay or Ed Acorn putting their own observation and their own wit into the conversation. So there's not then that coffee table or water cooler conversation among the chattering class of, did you see what Ed wrote this time, or did you hear what McKay said in his weekly commentary about Gina's rollout? Like, so there's fewer personalities that are talking about it on the air outside of the WPRO the WPRO schedule.
Yep.
And I think that leads a little bit of it to a place of there's not as many provocative moments from the outside that encourage others to engage in it. But again, I don't think like they're coming on TV around, if not the exact same time that we did in 2018. They're starting to ramp up the events, the endorsement stuff. Like just yesterday, Helena got the endorsement from the Cumberland Democrats.
Yep.
That stuff starts this time, and that's really kind of the unofficial kickoff season of the primary campaign season.
No question about it. I should also note that for our listeners that during our recording session right here, I did get an email that the governor has released a new campaign ad that is offshore wind oriented. So maybe they are moving in that direction a little bit in terms of, getting into the issues. To your point, though, yes, collapse in local journalism, loss of an opinion section. I don't think people realize the penetration of the Providence Journal as a physical newspaper to a lot of working class people. That is simply something that hasn't been replaced. Maybe they listen to WPRO or watch the 6 o'clock news, but they haven't replaced that with any digital
And
outlets or anything like that.
And even if they do watch that, what the Journal did for so long was they shaped what the next 24 hours were going to focus on. And the Gannett purchase of the paper is just taking that away. There's not the sense of whatever's on the front page of the Journal is going to be what is talked about on the news on WPRO. It's what the next show is going to take. It's what's going to lead the 6 o'clock news on WJAR, and it's going to be the source of the commentary on the Public's radio or Ocean State Media or Rhode Island Public Radio, whatever it was called at that point in time. So that takes some of that out because the Journal in its heyday, and they still have some great political reporters there, but the Journal in its heyday was treated and covered electoral politics like sports. And it
Yep.
was something that because of the way that they wrote about it, because of the ease that they opened it up to their readership, it became something that the vast majority of Rhode Islanders were fluent in. And I always cringe when I hear this. Rhode Island's the best, or was it the greatest amusement park for journalists? Like
Yeah.
I think it makes fun of or it belittles the things that we should actually stand up against.
Yep.
But the other side of that same coin was people paid attention, people understood, people knew who those local officials were and what was going on with it. But even then, when everybody knew Buddy's name and when you had Bruce Sunlin and you had Garrahy in the flannel shirt, even then, the average normal person And I'm saying normal with like acknowledging and recognizing that I'm abnormal in this. The general everyday Rhode Islander, even back then, was not waking up every morning wondering, when are they going to start running ads in this campaign?
Yeah,
There's only a special select few that think that way, and honestly, we should all up our Lexapro dosage.
that's right. And this is why years ago, right here on this podcast, probably in season 1, I remember offering the idea to Dan McGowan. Today, he's the Rhode Island columnist of the Boston Globe, the author of Roadmap, our mutual good friend. This notion of we need to make Rhode Island politics and media baseball cards. So it's like people start getting sick, you rip them open, you're like, you get like the random, like gold dipped, go local prov, like no character on it. It's just like an institution, go local
Oh, I
prov, just like
love that.
gold, just like start collecting that stuff.
Oh my God.
Turn it
You
into
just
like,
imagine that we're going to go down. We'll go down to Whiskey Republic, and over a couple of Guinness Zeros, I'll trade you a Gina Raimondo rookie card and a Peter Nerona All-Star card for a pack of unopened Providence City Council members.
exactly. Totally. It could be different for like Sad Alvidi would be a popular one. It'd just be him in an oversized, ill-fitting suit, just with a sad face. Mike Raia, Half Street Group, halfstreetgroup.com. We do this every month inside Communications. So just on the way out here, looking at as we head into summer, sort of balancing, checking out, staying in touch. That's a natural thing that all Rhode Islanders do. How do you do that as a professional? How do you balance, your life as a human, as a parent, as a
Oh man.
golfer, as a little league person, as an affable fella, with also like running a shop that is growing in its portfolio and scope every day?
Man, you asked this question at a timely moment. Check on yourself, check on the people around you. I'll be upfront about it. Like, I have done and been in and out of talk therapy at many different times in my life, and we'll be starting it again. Like, giving yourself that opportunity. That's not just during the summer. They definitely take care of yourself on that stuff. But I think like the big thing, like, we live in Rhode Island in the summer. There's no place better in the country to be. It's 85 degrees at the beach and it feels like 75. It dips down into the 60s at night. You can have shorts and a hoodie on. Like, there's find those opportunities, even if it's just a couple of minutes, even if it's a little bit of a window, and give yourself that reminder that regardless of where we live in this state, we're no more than 30 minutes away from a beach of some kind. And just get yourself out there and do that, and realize that for the vast, vast, vast majority of us, the things that we plug away at from 9 to 5 are still going to be there the next day. Like in PR, a lot of folks say it's like, this is PR, not ER. The stuff's it matters. It's important. The work that we do, it's not to belittle or dampen the impact that good communications can have on anything. But at the end of the day, it's like the things that are important are the people around you that are there for you at dinner, and that have your back in the best of times and the worst of times, and that's what you should be focused on. And if you can bring that ethos into what you do professionally, you're doing it better than most of us.
Mike Raia, Half Street Group. This is Inside Communications on Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Bill.
Our friends at the Coast Guard House have a new summer program starting this Thursday at 3 o'clock, Sound Waves, and it features DJ Dayglow. Bob Leonard from the Coast Guard House and DJ Dayglow join us here to talk about what's happening in Narragansett. Bob, what was the idea behind this?
We wanted to bring entertainment back to the deck. Pinning vinyl records is nostalgic, just like the Coast Guard House is.
It's an interesting parallel, the analog musical performance, sitting by the ocean, kind of slowing down and going back to the roots. Is that the idea here, DJ Dayglow?
That's definitely it. I really love creating intentional spaces with my music. So really picking records, slowing down, picking music that I think really complements the summer sounds of the Coast Guard House and the beachy vibes. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Bob, I think we got to get one of the sign-offs if you'd be so willing.
See friends, see food, see view. The Coast Guard House restaurant.